Hello, my name is Michelle Sherman, transformational coach and founder of the VAST Institute.
Hello, my name is Michelle Purnell Hepburn, and I currently serve the community as the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Director of the Seattle Foundation.
And we are the
Curly Girls.
Curly Girls.
Curly Girls.
We are your hosts today for a chat about how worthy and powerful you already are on the Curly Girls Guide to Belonging.
Our mission: to joyfully generate enthusiasm about how beautiful life is, and we all are, with anecdotes, techniques, and encouragement as two curly girls who've seen a lot. We will also demonstrate that when we belong to ourselves, we do not need to look outside for approval for what is already wonderful in each of us.
We offer perspective, inspiration, and practical tools to hone your world in a loving and compassionate manner. As Maxwell Maltz said, low self-esteem is like driving through life with your handbrake on. So let's do what we can to elevate our worthiness on this Curly Girls Guide to Belonging and address the issue that most of us are working with, how to feel more worthy. And can't think of a better way to start off than by asking Michelle, how do you see worthiness fitting into self-growth?
Worthiness grounds me in my body and my circumstances. It allows me to be whole and centered in the midst of what could be very challenging circumstances.
And right now, the world is in a very delicate place, Michelle. We are hurting. Our children are experiencing confusion and chaos based on changes in workflow and in where we work and how we relate to our families and taking care of our health during the pandemic. And so learning how to see the worth and the value in ourselves is a really resilient and wonderful approach to enjoying life, even in some of the difficult and rough times.
Absolutely. When I feel worthiness, I feel powerful. When I feel worthiness, I do not need to control others. Controlling myself is enough. And I am enough.
Yes. And as a very dear friend of mine once said, your presence is enough. That's really hard for us to sometimes get on a personal level. I know that for myself and my pursuing feeling more and more worthy and able to contribute on a larger scale to my friends, my family, the world, it's a very interesting experience to look at where we hold back on sharing how beautiful we are. And when you said wholeness is part of it, well, today we're going to be talking about wholeness, and when we're going to be talking about perfection doesn't work, we're going to be talking about people that have inspired us, what allies we may have had in our lives, and all of the things that you and I have experienced in our own personal quest to achieve a sense of worthiness and being, as you said, enough.
Now, there's a distinction, Michelle. There's a distinction between worthy and worthiness. Would you explain that?
I believe that worthiness and being worthy is externally indicated. So when somebody feels worthy, it's because there's been an external force that has said you are worthy. It's a subtle thing, but worthiness is inherent. Worthiness is the inherent magnificence that each of us has as a unique combination of talents, gifts, and abilities. Worthiness is the understanding, and we use the sharing of 6 competencies to understand how to organize our lives so that we can get our needs met in healthy, wonderful ways that honor, nourish, and delight us, and simultaneously respect the world around us. So in getting my needs met, being worthy is sometimes a little bit distracting because my eye is on external validation. Whereas you and I have talked about the internal validation, the validating between myself and that which is greater than myself, or myself and just knowing that I'm at peace with my being here. Your thoughts?
I agree. When I feel worthy, I just feel warm inside. I don't feel scared. And I realize that I don't have to be in control. I can remain an oasis of calm in the midst of chaos.
Mm. And may I just point out, Kindling the Flame, the book on cognitive replenishment that I wrote, it talks about how to remain an oasis of calm in the center of chaos and difficulty. Because, as you well know, Michelle, it's not just wanting to do it, it's also understanding brain chemistry and emotional intelligence and all of these skills that allow us to be examples and leaders in our life. It's an example. In the book, it talks about mirror neurons. So if I'm enthusiastic and excited, which I often am, people then get enthusiastic and excited with me because they're picking up on my brain chemistry, and we're meant to mirror each other. If I'm very sad and scared and upset and depleted, and then that is what other people can tune into as well, and kind of without knowing, feeling a little bit drained.
Right.
And so it's important to love people wherever they're at. But what we need to do is be aware of the impact it might have on us in our ability to remain that oasis in the midst of change, because feeling worthy allows that to happen. Why is worthiness, Michelle, such an important piece in your inclusion initiatives?
Inclusion is such a big word, and I see myself as a person who wants people to belong, to feel that they belong. There's no hierarchy. There's no this person's better than this person. We all have a right to belong. We all were given different strengths, gifts, dare I say, next on opportunities instead of weaknesses, ethnicities, and we need all to make the world go round.
And as you and I well know, being an example is the most powerful thing that can be done. Telling people, but being an example is when people really learn how to encourage themselves. I love when we talk about how beautiful people are, because I don't hear it often enough. And I'm talking about our imperfection as human beings. As a transformational coach and mentor, I have the joy of holding a mirror up to people and saying, hey, you don't have to be perfect. All you have to be is yourself and authentic and know how to work with it. So for me, the greatest gift in self-worth and worthiness is about knowing who I am, not being afraid of it, because most people are really terrified when they stop and they really get close and look in the mirror. They're not going to like what they see. But the truth is, that's just a fear. That's not necessarily what's underneath everything. And when you stop and you really take a look at who you are and what you've done, then it's usually quite magnificent. We just don't know how to give ourselves that much credit for having been born, gotten through our adolescence, and moving on to making a bigger difference in the world. So I'm absolutely awestruck by how successful, powerful, and encouraging most people are, even when they themselves might not know they're worthy and magnificent.
And as a coach, one of the directives that you give to your clients is to keep a journal, a spreadsheet, what have you, of your accomplishments.
Mm-hmm.
And I can say from experience in doing that, how that buoys me, or when I'm maybe having a tough time, referring to that just to get that reminder of accomplishments and watch my energy level change.
And also we are so focused. Another thing about the brain chemistry that I discovered in doing research for the book, Michelle, is that we're wired to pay attention to things that are going wrong so that our survival will be ensured. So if somebody shows up, in front of our house or home or apartment or dwelling, and they're yelling at the top of their lungs, they're going to get our attention, as opposed to the sweet child down the block who has a little group of flowers, to bring us, because we're wired to see what could be putting us in danger or in peril. But what's happened in modern society is every commercial is a call to action. And every TV show is like 3 or 4 difficult moments expressed in graphic detail. And so people stop realizing that they need to reset to joy, they need to reset to calm, they need to reset to peace, so that they can reclaim what's theirs, who they are, and what they believe to be most true in their lives, and how they want to proceed.
And how it starts possibly is with a deep breath. To start to climb back onto that ladder of worthiness often starts with a deep breath.
Or two. I love it.
Take as many as you need. They're free.
Right. And so when we're talking about worthiness, we're talking about something that our culture does not encourage, whether it's through spiritual trainings or humbleness, or families that don't want to be too boastful. We're told to really downplay how amazing and magnificent we are. And no one wants to be thought of as a narcissist, and no one wants to be thought of as arrogant. So what our challenge is to be realistic or authentic or genuine, as you and I speak about, really who we are, our warts and our beauty and our perfections and our strengths and the things we're just not that good at. And that's the wholeness that we talk about, is accepting that I'm this version of amazing human being and you're that version, and we all have a different combination of talent, and sometimes challenges. Yeah. So it's taking the whole enchilada, the whole package, and appreciating it about myself, and then I can appreciate it about other people. I wanted to ask you, how do you see that working out, the self-acceptance, the self-worth playing out in the world, as far as the ability to improve our collaboration, our interaction, our ability to love each other where we're all at?
I love this question. What comes to me is the pebble in the pond, the pebble in the lake, and the ripple effects that happen. Whether you call it pay it forward, whether you are just taking in healthy air, or doesn't matter. When I am feeling good about myself, the ripple effects happen. I'm sure there's a scientific explanation for that. I just know that it works.
Consciousness. It's like we all have these little beautiful clouds around our minds, and when they're happy, they blend into this bigger, beautiful cloud.
Right. During this time of fear that we are in, it is so important to be kind. And you and I have talked about kind-hearted power and how powerful that is as compared to controlling power or demeaning power. Kind-hearted power. And what came to me within the last few days preparing for this podcast was, showing kind-hearted power to myself.
I love it, Michelle, Because when people come to work with us, they're afraid they will be the only one who doesn't get it, the secret of being happy, or the secret. And we all think we're the only one. I can only say this because I've sat with so many different people, that we're the only one who won't figure out how to be a good person, or how to be happy, or how to be a good leader. And it's not the truth. It's just that kind of little residual concern that I may not get it, but we do. When we meet ourselves, we're truly quite happy once we own and take responsibility for the parts of us we would like to heal or mend or improve on, or increase that kindness. So one of the things that I wanted to ask was, loving myself and feeling my worth. Absolutely, it's taken me this many years to grow into feeling this good about myself, and I know I've got a ways to go. So what's helped me along the way, and I wanted to talk to you and hear a couple of examples about allies, the people who are the mirrors. It's like holding that mirror up and saying, you are amazing and magnificent. And until you discover that for yourself, I will hold that for you, because I see how hard you're working. I see how beautiful you are. I see how tough you are on yourself. And I will hold that mirror up. And those are the allies that we speak of. So I have an example. May I share?
Please.
Well, I was doing research for today, and I thought to myself, Marilyn Monroe was doing singing parts in the 1950s in some of her movies. And so she was told that in order to improve her singing, she should listen to Ella Fitzgerald, a wonderful African-American jazz singer who was just doing Cole Porter, taking by storm. She did scat before it was cool. I mean, she was an amazing songstress, and people loved her work. But she was an overweight Black lady who didn't have the Lena Horne, Dorothy Dandridge, look. And so when she wanted to work in the larger clubs, they said absolutely not. And Marilyn Monroe went to the Macombo in Los Angeles in 1955 and said, listen, if you let Ella play at this first-rate club, I will sit in the front row and bring my star-stricken friends so that you've got the best publicity in the world. I will be here every night. You have her here. And so he reluctantly, the owner, said, sure, we'll give her a week or two. Well, it turns out that Marilyn kept her word, showed up with Frank Sinatra, showed up with Judy Garland, showed up with people that were just like at the top of the Hollywood game at that time, and sat in the front row. And as a result of that, Ella said she never had to work a second-rate club again, and was given the authority and the magnificent accolades that she deserved as one of our great songstresses of the 20th and 21st century. That's an ally. Put her butt on the line and didn't care what anybody thought. And it was really risky back then. You can speak to that better than I can, to really stand up in the 1950s for your African-American buddies.
Absolutely. It is such a privilege to have allies in my life. Allies also can be people who are willing to tell you the truth. May not want to hear it, but every person who has shared with me a truth, I could at least pick out a kernel of wisdom in that truth.
Mm-hmm.
So there's wonderful to have allies in our lives. It is also critical to be an ally for myself. And my example, which is part of this wonderful program that we're putting on, is having curly hair. And how many times I was told that I had to have a different look in order to assimilate into society, professional society. And women of color often have had extreme difficulty being accepted simply due to our hair. And you may know that California, just in the year 2020, passed a law allowing Black people to wear their hair naturally or how they want to wear their hair. A law had to be passed. That's incredulous to me. And yet, we must continue to walk on in spite of these ridiculous pronouncements.
And the pronouncements, Michelle, they're not just about hair. I hear you and say it wasn't because your hair was a problem. It was because it was your hair. It was a problem. So if it had been somebody else's hair, it might not have been such a problem. But on certain heads, it was a problem. So it wasn't the hair, it was the head upon which it sat, is my hunch. Okay. But there's not just hair. We talk about the Curly Girl's Guide to Belonging because people have made fun of, they keep telling me I shouldn't want my curly hair. And I love my curly hair. As a matter of fact, last week, somebody who was my daughter's, one of her colleagues' mom said, "Oh my God, look at your hair. It still looks good." And I thought, well, thank you. But there's also other things in which we don't accept and love ourselves. And we reduce our self-worth because people make fun of our hair, because people make fun of our age. Remember, we were talking about how difficult it is to really feel comfortable if you're of a certain age, because culturally you're told you're already out to pasture. And it's not true.
Beautiful people, I have found, my experience, most beautiful people are those people who are comfortable in their own skin. And I tie that to feeling worthy.
Mm-hmm.
They're not trying to be taller than they are, shorter than they are, wider than they are, smaller than they are. They just are. And that feeling of being around them is precious.
And it's nourishing. And it's also uplifting to know that we're all going through. And I said earlier that everybody that I've ever worked with has said, I think I'm the only one who won't be able to figure out how to be comfortable with myself as a whole human being. It's like we each have that moment of doubt. It's like a glitch in our minds and our consciousness. And then there are people in our lives who stoke that negativity.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are people who erase it and lift our heads up to see how beautiful we already are.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So how does one, would you say, shift from, we talk about self-worth and worthiness. What would you suggest as a step? Let's talk about a step, a step that you would suggest people take to enhance their self-appreciation. As we call it at VAST, we have a competency on self-wisdom. Because if you know who you are, then you can be wise about how to relate to the world, how to relate to people, how to create relationships. Self-wisdom is, I think, a very precious part of health and well-being.
I would start, as I normally start, with a pencil and a piece of paper. And I would not only write down what I thought my best qualities are, I would also write down what are my core needs.
Mm-hmm. And why would you include those in your self-worth assessment?
I include those because I look at myself in the mirror every day. And everyone has an inner voice that can tend to be kind or not. And I need something that I can look at on a regular basis to remind me who I am. And the best person to remind me who I am is me.
Mhm. Mhm.
Writing down my core needs helps me attract what I really want in my life, not what I think I can have. So many of us get into the wrong lane, I like to say. My lane is the what lane. What do I want? The how to get that, or the how lane, is really none of my business. My lane is the what lane. And so the more and more I can understand and get clear on my core needs and what it is that I want,
Mhm.
the more my energy level rises
Mhm.
and the more I attract what I want.
What I do with Vast is talk about celebrate you, people who celebrate me. One of the shortcuts in self-worth is being surrounded by people who are happy for my success. So I don't have to hide the fact that something great happened because five other people are going to be slightly resentful and go, who do you think you are? Well, the more joy we each have, the more joy we have to share.
Right. And it's their own insecurities that are showing, not yours.
Which upsets them even more some days. But that's okay. So, um, sitting down with a piece of paper, absolutely, absolutely. And anything else that you can clue people in on that might be a helpful hint or two to get things going.
Well, let's talk about that piece of paper. That piece of paper is creation.
We were
That
talking about that last episode.
that piece of paper is creation. That piece of paper should be very messy. Creation is messy. And this piece of paper you should write in the margins. You should write upside down. You should write, you should write, you should write. And then you should put it down and look at it. See if it feels good. Oh, there's something else I need to add. Let me erase that, put that in. Oh, what about this? Erase that, put that in. It's a living, breathing document that I get to come back to when I need to, add, cross out, add again, even if it's the same word over and over and over. Today it's this, it was yellow, now it's blue, now it's yellow, doesn't matter.
And as you grow.
And as you grow and watch over time, what stays, what changes,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and what stays, you can call your core needs. So, one of my core needs, which I learned many years ago, actually, during a class where you and I met,
Mm-hmm.
was that my greatest strength was honesty. That's my greatest strength.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what does that mean? That means that I need to be honest. It doesn't, there's not a value judgment there. I just know that when I am honest, especially with myself, circumstances become manageable. Circumstances become beautiful. Circumstances become easy. Circumstances become loving. But especially when I'm willing to tell myself the truth.
Absolutely, because Michelle, you can only be as honest with the rest of us. I can only be as honest with the world as I am with myself. And a lot of times when I'm not honest with myself, I project it into the world and blame other people for things I'm not able to look at in my own direction. And that's just a human thing. We all have those misunderstandings and misguided communications. And it's about getting a handle on it lovingly, gently, and realizing that loving ourselves and knowing how to work with who we truly are forgiving ourselves and learning how to heal. That's the greatest gift. Being perfect doesn't exist. It's wholeness, not perfection. Remember, it's about being all of that and knowing how to be what I love is teaching people how to be in right relationship to their entire selves. And then things start lighting up because there's a calmness. And when you're wise, when you have the self-wisdom, or you have the healthy relationship handle, or you have the personal value system on board, you have a confidence that is unshakable. And the confidence in, I have confidence in my goodness. I don't think I'm perfect. I do make mistakes. I sometimes, run out of gas, whatever I do, you know, but I have confidence in my goodness and confidence that I will clean up my mess and confidence that I will always do my best to make it right with other human beings. So I'm not worried about any of that and I don't need to, I just go about being confident that I can be honest in the world, as you said, and be successful and make a contribution without having to compromise myself. And that takes a lot of courage. It really does take courage to be authentic in this world.
And all that is worthiness.
Yes.
All of that is worthiness. Because even when I am worthy, when I am in worthiness, I can even be wrong.
Mm-hmm. And just be slightly embarrassed by it, which is different than toxic shame.
Exactly. Exactly. I can say, you're absolutely right. I goofed. And no one fell down. The world didn't end.
Yes. And the thing is, that is so important. As adults, there are certain things that we need to be able to do the same way you need to brush your teeth. Mm-hmm. You need to be able to admit when you made a mistake gracefully.
Yes.
And then clean up your mess with the help of those wonderful people around you who are going, oh, thank God it wasn't me this time. Because people are just so, that's one of the things, when you're out there and you're leading, talk about business for a moment, and people, you're so visible. When you're a leader who understands how to gracefully admit there was a misstep or a misunderstanding or a miscommunication and address it and clean it up, people trust you. They understand. They may not like everything you say or do, but they respect you. So, for those of the folks who are listening from the business standpoint, confidence in knowing that you're going to be consistent, being consistent with people, confident, that's self-worth. People understanding that, hey, I can admit to the fact that I made a mistake. I'm not going to be crucified or hurt or harmed for it. And then I can get help cleaning it up because it was something that was not anticipated. That's when people really want to be there for you.
Absolutely.
Let me give an example, if I may, on self-worth and taking a big risk and not knowing how it's going to turn out. And this was a personal experience. I was working in, and I'd love to hear more from you as well, Michelle. But I was working in 1980s. There was a group called Beyond War. And they were out of Palo Alto, and they were working diligently to talk about how any violence could escalate to nuclear violence through through countries, through whatever, but that any violent resolution of conflict through violent means was not a good thing because we had nuclear weapons on the planet. Still a brilliant idea, and a lot of work has been done. But I was doing this. I was doing satellite connections, and we were trying to create peace and talk about disarmament, and peace is an option. But I realized at that time, I had a war going on in my family. There were members of my personal family who were not communicating. In my nuclear family who were having difficulty, and they were angry at each other, and they were unwilling to see past being right. And whether somebody was at fault or not, I realized I had a war of that nature going on in my nuclear family, and how could I in good conscience go out into the world and try to fix it there when I was ignoring it in my nuclear family. So I thought about what I could do to be in integrity with that. And I wrote them all a letter. The people involved, I wrote a letter from my heart, explaining what I was doing and explaining why this came up and explaining how I felt it was time for them to consider peace, or I would be, negotiating a peace agreement. Make a long story short, the members of the family who had been ill at ease with each other did make up and saw each other for the first time, I think, in a decade. And one of them passed on late, a couple of years later, and it was just the biggest difference that they had made that attempt to be at peace with each other. And it could have blown up my entire family, but I knew in my heart that I could not talk about peace another day until I took care of it in my own world and had the confidence that I was worthy of speaking the truth, so it takes courage some days.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Worthiness is not without its challenges.
I was worthy to have a family that was at peace. Still have little tiffs every once in a while, but they love each other fiercely. But that what I'm talking about is I was worth that. It came from a place of worthiness. It wasn't like a great idea. It wasn't like, oh, I'll get brownie points. It was, I deserved to have peace in a way that it wasn't out there. It was, as we said, inside. And I was called to action. So,
yes, that's great. That's great. My example, I have two examples, and they've both related to employment. And I found out that a person who I highly respected in the industry that I was in at the time, that they were looking for a person at the time, a CFO. And I called this person, got their voicemail, and said, I understand that you're looking for a CFO. I don't know the qualifications that you are requiring. What I know is that I want to work for you. And of course, gave him my phone number, da, 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 da. And a month later, I worked for that person.
that's the confidence, the self-worth, and the risk-taking all mixed in together. I love that. Congratulations.
Thank you. And that happened again at another organization when I found out that they needed someone. And I called a person who I knew worked there. And I said, basically same thing. I don't know what you're looking for, but I would love to work for you again. And at the same time, I had an interview at a place that was literally 90 miles away from my home, door to door. And this organization, which was 2.5 miles away, door to door. And I was blessed enough to get offers from both organizations. One would have been very, very, very high up in the company, in the C-suite, but it was 90 miles away. And I chose what was right for my family and for me, which was the one that was 2.5 months away.
Right. And I just want to understand if you're inferring that you had the confidence to not have to prove anything by taking the C-suite job 90 miles away that would have compromised your quality of life, that you had the confidence to know you would make it to the same and the best place without having to compromise yourself in that way.
Exactly.
That's self-worth.
That I deserve to have the life that I had created with my family, in my neighborhood, with my neighbors. That other job although it had all the trappings of being in a C-suite, I was also going to have to, more than likely, move, at least during the week, and stay away from my family near work, not drive 90 miles every day.
Every day.
Wasn't
Not a good thing.
wasn't worth it. I was worth more.
And that is a beautiful example of something that I would like to add to the discussion, and that is self-worth and worthiness, understanding I'm worth something takes a lot of imagination. And the imagination is, how can I get my needs met? This is what we specialize in at Vast. How can I get my needs met in a way that is uniquely satisfying and honoring of who I am? Not what's out there, not what is already created, not what I already see, but how do I create something that is uniquely meant to support my vision, my way of being in the world, and my contribution. And imagining it possible. We talked about that in our toots, imagine it possible, imagine it delightful, wonderful, imagine it now. Well, imagination is part of self-worth. Imagining that even though I might not feel I understand everything, I'm still a competent leader. Even though I might not know the outcome, I have confidence that every step of the way I was taking care of my team and being honorable and doing the best for profits as well as for people. Tell me, what is it that you would like everybody in our audience to know about appreciating themselves?
It's an inside job. It's me telling me how appreciative I am of the gifts that I have to give. It's an inside job.
I love that. And I do want to point out that inside job at Vast, we do what we can to support people clarifying that for themselves by their own standards through our healthy relationship workshops or through our self-wisdom curriculum or intentional life design, because I know for a fact that most people are not clear or updated on how magnificent they are, all the skills that they now possess, all the ways that they are currently amazing in the world and to the world. I do want to share one thought that I enjoyed seeing, and that was from Eleanor Roosevelt. And she said, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." And that can be very harsh for some people. Go, hey, wait a second. But what she's saying is, when we stop, we have conversations like Michelle and I are having right now about our experiences, about the growth that we go through on a weekly, daily basis, and the fact that self-worth and supporting each other and celebrating each other, is an ongoing process. As she said, it's a lifelong, living, breathing process that we can support each other in. It's just a beautiful thing. And to turn our attention from the negative to what's amazing about us. What I'd like to say is I so appreciate you, your time, your beauty, the fact that you and I believe in kind-hearted power, and that you don't have to be dominant. It's dominion, not domination. It's there's a wisdom of kind-hearted power that transcends negativity and bullying, and it does take support. So thank you for all the support that you offer through the foundation. And I do hope that people do take a quick look at the Vast Institute for how we can support those who want to honor themselves and truly own how magnificent they are. Thank you, Michelle, for being with us today. Please make sure to see the belonging work that Michelle Purnell Hepburn is doing at the Seattle Foundation, and explore the Vast Institute to hear other podcasts about authenticity and tips with Michelle. She's on our podcast sheet. delightfully so, or become a subscriber to our most enjoyable and enriching workshops and events at the VAST Institute. Peruse our marketplace or for self-affirming treasure of all manner, especially healthy relationship workbooks, intentional life design work, and of course, self-wisdom. We are so glad that you were here with us today. And until next time, Michelle and I would like to say thank you from the Curly Girls Guide to Belonging. Michelle, would you like to just say goodbye one more time?
Early girls. See you next time.
Thank you.